Welcome to the Bookish Hour with your hosts, Sarah E. Burr and J.C. Kenney. And we are live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Bookish Hour. I am your host, Sarah E. Burr, author of the Trending Topic Mysteries, the Glenmire Whim Mysteries, the Book Blogger Mysteries, and the Court of Mystery series, joined by my co-host.
And I am J.C. Kenney, who can't hang with that at all, but that's okay, because I am the author of the Allie Cobb Mysteries, the Darcy Gaughan Mysteries, and the upcoming Elmo Simpson Mysteries. And I tell you what, Sarah, this is so much fun. I want to say welcome to the holidays, everybody. We are kicking it off big time with, I couldn't think of a better author and friend to have with us today as we get the holiday season in gear. Sarah, introduce our fabulous guest, please.
Yes, and the holidays are here. And again, our guest is going to bring us full of holiday cheer. We can't wait. Christina Romeril, the author of the Killer Chocolate Mysteries. So delicious, so just so full of warm fuzzies that will just have you feeling the spirit of Christmas. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here. Last year, it was my debut book. So yes. It's exciting to be here this year with book 2 in the series. I'm just excited.
I can't wait to talk about that this past year, because I imagine that the transition from, writing your first book, being a debut author, now to getting the second one out there, working on the second, has been a different experience. And hopefully we can kind of learn the ropes and hear like what challenges and what the surprises were along the way. But before we get into that this evening, Chris, do you mind just taking a couple minutes to introduce yourselves to folks who may not be familiar with you and your work?
Okay, I'm Christina Romeril, and I am the author of the Killer Chocolate Mysteries. Book 1 is A Christmas Candy Killing, and book 2, which just came out in October, is The Nutcracker Nightmare. It is about two identical twin sister sleuths, and they live in the village of Harriston, Montana, which is actually a fictional place, but if it were real, it is about 3 hours from where I live. And they have a cast of what I like to think of as fun, quirky side characters that help them to sleuth out the killer in the books.
I have to agree with your supporting cast, because I mean, especially in Nutcracker Nightmare, the personalities that we're introduced to just right off the page, there are a lot of big personalities and a lot of potential suspects that come into the mix. And hopefully this isn't too much of a spoiler, but I will say that once our victim was introduced to us, I was like, I hope he dies. and I love reading a cozy mystery where the victim is somebody that I'm not necessarily feeling too sorry for, as just because it's I don't like it when good people are harmed or bad things happen to good people. But this individual, he comes in swinging, literally. And so I would love to know, Chris, when you were kind of developing the second mystery, did you know right away who you were going to kill? And did you know who the suspects were going to be right off the bat? Or was it something that you had to discover along the way?
Something you just said. My first book, I killed off my first victim was actually a very nice person.
She was so sweet.
I know, and I feel quite guilty about killing her off. And so in A Nutcracker Nightmare, I wanted to make sure that my victim was someone that was so loathsome that it would be hard to find a redeeming quality. in him. And so there would be so many suspects because he was just that nasty. And he, I kind of had him in my mind right from the beginning when I had to come up with the idea for that story. The rest of the suspects kind of came along as I wrote the story. I mean, you know, you start with a few ideas and then you polish them. Sometimes, you know, you discard one and you create something new. And it was a process to gather the rest of the suspects. But yeah, my victim was always very clear as to what he was and who he was. And yeah, even his parents, I think it's mentioned, weren't that keen on him.
There's literally a comment where it's like they like went away on a cruise to get away from him. I was like, oh my gosh, like this guy, he's got everything going against him. And just to say hello to all of the folks joining us in the chat this evening. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. We've got Claudia, Mark, Farmhouse Reader, Mizan, DHB. Thank you so much, you guys, for being here. If you have questions for Christina along the way, feel free to pop them into the chat. Chris, you had mentioned about, and it's interesting, in book one, where you had your the woman who is murdered, she's actually a good friend of Alex's. And it feels natural for Alex to get involved into the mystery that way, because it's like, you know, I have to bring justice for my friend. So it's always tricky when you have a victim that, you know, is kind of an antagonist with your main character. So how did you decide to, for folks who haven't read it yet or may not be familiar with the series, how did you go about getting Alex inserted into this mystery this time around?
Well, they are, I should always clarify, so if it's confusing at all, they are not part of the reunion per se, right? This was not their high school reunion. They grew up in Frankenmuth, Michigan. So they are just there to volunteer. They're helping out. And so they don't really know these people. They don't have any real connection to them. And so, you know, I mean, he was a nasty person. And so I thought, well, there has to be some, you know, reason for Alex to get involved. And of course, because he's such a piece of work, it was actually Hannah who had some contact with him prior to the reunion. And so when the murder happens, she unfortunately has told some fibs and has put herself in a vulnerable position to be accused of the murder. And that's why Alex, of course, has to insert herself into the investigation, because she has to take care of her sister.
I think that is a very admirable reason to get involved in a murder mystery.
Yeah, you know, and that's one of the things that makes me always, one of the reasons I love the types of, I love to read the books that we write, is throughout those whodunits, is I think authors like yourself and, well, both you, Chris, and Sarah, are masterful at kind of threading that needle, in that we want to have, gotta love this conversation topic. We want to kill somebody that people like enough to care about, but we don't want to like them too much that our readers are heartbroken or upset when we kill somebody off. You know, and so I guess, could you kind of talk about, you know, what your approach has been, Chris? Now you've got 2 books in. You had a really sweetheart, you know, in one, and you had a really bad guy in another one. Sarah, I know you've talked about in your books, you love to have the bad guys kind of get what's coming to them at the end. So Chris, can you kind of talk a little bit about your thought process with deciding the character traits of who is the person who is done away with?
So, like we said, I kind of went from one end and swung to the complete opposite end between books 1 and 2. But generally, I think what you said, JC, is right. I think there needs to be some sort of redeeming quality in everybody, because you want there to be some kind of emotion for that character, right? I mean, we don't want to cheer when he's killed off or she's killed off. I think in the case of A Nutcracker Nightmare, when the victim is killed off, it's a, murder is bad. And so, we can't just let people go around killing other people. And yet at the same time, we're like, huh. I mean, he's not getting a lot of people to shed tears for him. But I think, and in the book that I'm working on now, I am, even though the character again is maybe not the nicest that's being killed off, it is someone who does have, and I do show some redeeming quality. So that, that you can kind of see that there is, that everybody has something to keep them, just a tiny bit of nice in them. And I think, that is important, because we do want to, draw the reader in, just like even for the villain, right? The murderer. We want to show that this is not just a bad person, but that they too are, have two sides to the coin, and they are also, have some redeeming qualities. And so, so I definitely want to make sure that, both my victim and my villain, usually, well, the villain especially, that has some redeeming qualities. So.
I do like to have a sympathetic villain sometimes, where it's like, oh, you feel bad that life has gone this way for them. And one thing that, as I was reading A Nutcracker Nightmare and thinking about the last time that you were on the show, Chris, you had mentioned that initially when you had been developing the Killer Chocolate Mysteries, that you hadn't been anticipating to have it happen at Christmas for every book. And so one thing that I was curious as a writer, and as someone, it's like when you have to make a change to the kind of developmental arc of your characters, did you, when you were working on book 2, was there a lot that you had to kind of tweak and adjust, because we're now a year later than when we had met these characters, and figuring out like, okay, like how do I fill in the reader with everything that's happened during the spring, summer, and fall, but yet feel like we're still catching up with them, and it hasn't been like that long since time has passed.
That was a tricky one, because of course, originally it was, Nutcracker Nightmare was set just before Valentine's Day. So, not a long period of time. And so you can have kind of a slow natural progression. But of course, when you skip a whole year, things are happening during that year. And so I suddenly was faced with, well, how do I explain, like, do I want my characters, especially in the romance, do I want them to go from 1 minute they're, just kind of going on their first date to then a year later, where would they naturally be? Well, in a year, I mean, my husband and I were married. So that presented kind of a problem. I thought, well, what plausible explanation could I give for, that period of time, not too much having happened? And so I did have to come up with a creative solution for in this case, Tom, the love interest, having been away for that period of time. And even for Hannah, what happened, because there was kind of a bit of something going on with her in her love life. And so, I had to come up with some, again, plausible reasons for these things to kind of be on hold for a year. So, and of course now with book 3, because I, went into it knowing that there would be that 1 year gap. I've kind of, I've written it in such a way that, again, there's a reason that things haven't moved too far. So
that's a really interesting, I don't want to say a conundrum, but a challenge that you must have, Chris, because I think for a lot of us in fiction, when we're writing, that's one of the conceits that we are fortunate to have. It's like, okay, I'm going to do one now, and I want a little bit of time to pass. And so it's maybe 3 or 4 months, and then maybe, a few months after that. But now you've got real, kind of specific guidelines. Can you talk about just kind of in general what the, if there are some unique challenges, or by the same token, what are some of the fun things that you do? Because, hey, you're talking the holidays, you're talking Christmas every book. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I mean, having it at Christmas, look around me, right? I mean, I love Christmas. And so writing the story set at Christmas, I mean, I have no issue doing that. I love it. For the coming up with the things, that kind of, to kind of make that work for, a 1 year later scenario. It does take a little creativity. Thankfully, I have had some ideas for that. And so for book 3, like I came up with a very specific scenario in book 2 that explained away many, many months, and so that worked easily. And then for this next book, I have some things happening that that I can allude to that happened that will hopefully help bring some humor into it, actually. So I'm using humor as one of the reasons for the, kind of the relationships to be stalled a little bit and that sort of thing. So, and I love writing humor into the book. I mean, I like reading humor, and I'm trying my hand at infusing more humor into it. We'll see if that works once I get some more beta readers onto it. But yeah, so that's kind of the direction I've taken. Is I've assumed, like, and I allude to things that have happened through the year, but that give a plausible reason as to why things haven't progressed as much as they might ordinarily have. So.
Well, I'm super excited that we're going to get more of this community and these characters to hear that we have book 3 on the way. So that's very fun to say.
I am in the process of writing book 3. Book 3 is not contracted. Crooked Lane has not yet picked it up. But if they do not pick it up, there are some publishers out there that will continue a series that's already started. And so I am hopeful that I will be able to sell book 3 and potentially more books, obviously, to another publisher if Crooked Lane does not continue the series. So my absolute belief is that this series will continue in one form or another. So.
Okay, folks, that's your cue. Hit that buy button. As soon as we're done, we need to have more of Chris's books coming out. So, and so you have your mission should you all choose to accept it.
Excellent. And just welcoming, we have Spencer saying hello in the chat. Thank you for being here this evening. And Chris, that's so awesome, though, that you have options, because if we think about like kind of the landscape of the publishing industry for the past, several years now, that, there's so much more power that we authors have than I think that we had before. So it must be really nice to be able to have to know that as you're writing, like you can continue to tell these stories and think about things further down the line to figure out like, how am I going to, keep these characters' lives going?
Yes. And in fact, I know that one of the missions that I must accomplish this month, aside from getting book 3 written, is I need to be thinking about books 4 and 5, because that is also something that I have to be thinking about the continuity arc of the characters and the series and so on. So yeah, I'll be thinking about, I have not yet come up with any ideas yet for books 4 and 5. So I'm looking forward actually to spending a weekend and coming up with some fun ideas for those, because up to book 3, I actually had those ideas, or at least the core of the idea planned for when book 1 initially went out on submission to publishers. I already had those ideas in play, whereas now I'm getting to actually come up with something brand new. And, we talked about that. You talked about that, Sarah. Book 1 was my debut. It was literally my first book. I had never, written so much as a short story that wasn't something, for a grade in school. And so there was a huge learning curve going from book 1 to book 2. And going from book 2 to book 3, huge. I have learned so much with each book. And so hopefully you can kind of see that the books, I'm learning a little bit more about writing setting and characters and just different things. And so there is a progression. And I've heard it said by many authors that they cringe to go back, to their early books and read them. And in fact, many won't. Because of course, when I go back to, sometimes look things up, for continuity in the story from book one. And I do sometimes cringe a little and think, oh, I should have done this or that. But yeah, you're always learning. It doesn't matter what profession you're in, you're always learning. And as writers, we are constantly learning and progressing in our craft of writing. So
that's such a good point, Chris, because I'm just thinking, and JC, we've talked about this, especially with the fact that my latest book, Over My Dead Blog, was actually like my second cozy mystery that I ever wrote way back when. And when I went to revisit it this past year and was reading it, I was like, oh my God, like what? Like, who ever thought that I could write, because it was terrible. And luckily I had the time and was able to go and just like do an overhaul, because, you don't often get like a second chance to make a first impression. And so it was like, I was so grateful to have that opportunity, because otherwise it would have been like, I can't believe that this book existed in the shape that it had been prior. And it was like going to be published that way. At one point I was like, oh my gosh, like dodged a bullet on that one. So what I'm curious to know, Chris, is what are some of the things that you have learned from, let's do from book one to book two. What were some of the things that, like, going in, you're like, okay, this is how I have to tackle this, or this is something that I know I'm going to struggle with, so I have to approach it this way. Like, what were some of those obstacles for you?
So one of the things that I learned early on is I actually almost write more dialogue with not enough interiority. And so that is something that I am constantly struggling with. Some people do a lot more interiority and they struggle more with dialogue. For me, it's the dialogue comes easier. And so in book two, I hope that I've put in a little bit more interiority, probably still not enough. And the other thing that I remember thinking after I finished book one was I needed more setting. And so I worked on that a little bit more in book two. Developing the characters a little bit more, the action beats, having the characters doing something other than a lot of nodding. And in our first drafts, I'm sure that this is a thing for most authors. There is a lot of nodding and smiling going along. Mm-hmm. So I learned a lot of those little things. The actual whodunit part. So when I was writing the first book, I understood, clues and red herrings and everything, but I was really conflicted about how difficult do you make the mystery. And so I waffled. I put clues in and then I took them out and I put them back in again. And I think in the end, I went too easy. I think I made it too obvious who the killer was. And so I thought, I am not making that mistake with book two. And so in book two, I really did work backwards. So, from the murder and then, developing the clues and everything to make sure that each suspect, had means, motive, and opportunity, and that that the clues were there, because you got to play fair, but that they were not too obvious. And so I think I did that successfully in book two. I know I probably have some real haters out there because I put so many characters into my books. and I will admit there were a slew of suspects in book two. That is in part because I love reading a book that has a lot of characters and a lot of suspects, because I really want to be challenged. And I love the community of people. And I know it does make it a little tricky in the beginning as you're kind of getting to know suspects and getting to know the characters and everything. But yeah, that is something I honestly am one of those people. I count, how many characters that I have, and I think, gee, is that too many? And in book three, I actually just combined two characters because I thought, I want to add someone new because I've got a new idea and I need to, keep it manageable. So I combined two characters, and so that was something I was conscious of in book two, but I really I just felt, the story needed those characters, and so that's what I did. And so even though I was aware in book one that some people said, a lot of characters, hard to remember, in book two, I wrote what I thought needed to be there.
I think that totally makes sense for, the story that you're giving us, because you're at a school reunion and it's like there's going to be a ton of people there. And while it becomes kind of a locked room mystery because everybody's at this community center in the middle of a blizzard, yet you still have like a lot of people that are there. But I think one thing that, and I noticed this is like one of the things that an editor told me a long time ago, and now I always pick up on it when I'm reading, is if you have like multiple characters whose names begin with the same letter, it's really hard to keep people in check. Like, who is this person? Like, and what I noticed is like, okay, everybody had such a distinctive name and a distinctive personality that you were presenting us with, that it made it I feel effortless to kind of follow along and figure out like who everybody is and how everyone's involved together.
That is something that our agent Dawn, who recently passed away, told me right at the beginning when she read my manuscript. She said, "You've got too many people that start with M." And so I was like, okay, I've got to change some names. So I actually do a list of all of the available letters of the alphabet in each book, and then I choose the names based on those letters. So so you won't see a lot of people in my books with names starting with the same letter. I do have Drew and Duncan, and that was pointed out to me, and I said, nope, father and son, I'm keeping those two names. They don't sound the same, and I wanted that in there. But I did change a lot of names. Even in A Nutcracker Nightmare, I at the end changed a lot of names because sometimes I just use filler names. I don't know if you guys do that, where I'll call them, Sally for the book, knowing that that's probably not the name that they're going to get at the end. And so at the end, I go through and it's like, okay, is this the right name or do we need to change it? And I did change a number of names at the end of A Nutcracker Nightmare. And in fact, I did actually change the killer at the end of A Nutcracker Nightmare too. I was pretty well done the manuscript and had an idea for switching the killer to one of the other characters, and did. So yeah.
I think that's so brave. And because JC, I remember for Darcy Gaughan 2, I believe that you had done something similar. And I was like, I don't know how you guys are doing this, but I actually did switch a killer recently. And I was like, oh, it was a nice surprise for myself, where I was like, oh, like this, I think would work better because, all along I'm reading the book and thinking, okay, like this person is who everybody's going to think it is because XYZ is happening. So how do I subvert that expectation? And when that light bulb goes on, it's like, oh wait, like this person actually has a better reason to commit the crime. And I think that's like such an interesting part of the creative process, where we think that we have the roadmap ahead of us, but then we veer off and it's like, well, we're going this direction now.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know. Do you guys ever find that whether it's at night as you're kind of, just winding down at the end of the day, maybe even already laying in bed, and you start to think about things, and then suddenly ideas for the current work in progress pop into your head about something, a plot point or let's change the killer. And then that's how I know I'm immersed in the story, is when my mind is working on it, even when I'm not really consciously aware of it. So. Oh
yeah. That happens to me all the time. And I'm grateful that my mind is doing that for me. And Chris, I share your character naming pain, because currently I have two characters in my work in progress. One's named Bobby and one's named Barry. And it's like, I know it's like, okay, I'm going with it. This is just the first draft. Someone's going to have to get a new name for draft number 2, but it's like, yeah, I can't have that.
I am all about, like, I love names because I love to see if there's like some like the, ancient meaning of a name can somehow reflect the character. And so I spend a lot of time like on all of these websites, especially if I like know kind of the person's ancestry, and like can look into like names from like a particular region or and whatnot. And I feel like I really love getting a character's name down. And because I feel like if I put the name Sally in my manuscript, I would forget that wasn't like a placeholder. And I would be like, oh, and then end up with like 5 Sallys. So it's like, that's like one thing when like I will stop. Or if it's like, oh, I have a new character coming onto the page. It's like, I will stop everything, even if I'm like, oh, I got to keep writing, and I will go in and I will figure out what to name them. Cause it's like, it helps me like form them in my mind. But I was listening to something recently where, or maybe it was somebody that was a guest, but they had said something where if somebody doesn't further the plot, that you shouldn't give them a name. Yeah. And I think I always name people. And so I was like, oh man, like, do I need to change like who I'm giving names to? If it's like, the person who held the door open for somebody, like, okay, maybe I'm not going to say who their name is, but I feel like, especially characters that I know will probably pop up in some shape or form during another book, that's like, I'm just going to give them a name.
Yes. I agree with that. Actually, if I don't name them, it's because they're just, they're necessary to hold that door open or something like that, but they really have no other purpose in the book. So usually if I'm giving them a name, either they're germane to the story, or I have put a few people with names in because it's a bit of humor. And so the humor is adding, something because of the names in it, and so sometimes that'll happen. But yeah, for the most part, and I do research names as well. So if my character is like, for instance, Italian heritage and they're 50, I'll go back and see what were the popular names in Italy in 19 whatever. And so because I'm trying to get it somewhat right? Mm-hmm. You're not going to name somebody who was born, 60 years ago, I don't know, Dallas, right? Or yeah, right. You've got to keep it, somewhat realistic to the time periods and stuff. But at the same time, every now and again, I also like to name someone with a name that's a little bit different, just because it helps them stand out from the other characters. So, and I know I was, I don't know, read somewhere that between books 1 and 2, or maybe it was between books 2 and 3, who can remember, that you should give each character something distinctive about them. So, maybe a character wears black nail polish, and that's, something very distinctive about them. But yeah, it helps for the reader to remember them if there is something distinctive about them, even if it's just one characteristic, but something. So.
I like to do like certain mannerisms where somebody is like, oh, this person, they always like massage the back of their neck when they're stressed out, or, another person, the way that their eye like gaze is described. I like to use that to like carry through so that people like make those connections for sure.
Yeah. In A Nutcracker Nightmare, one of the suspects likes to twirl her hair. So that was the characteristic that I gave her, was the hair twirling thing. So, but yeah.
Yeah. And I apologize for interrupting, but I just want to let everybody know that unfortunately we're having such a good time. We're already 35 minutes into our chat. So, and this has just been a blast. So, hey, folks, just a reminder, if you got any questions for Chris or you have any comments, please, drop them in the chat. Sarah and I are keeping an eye on those. And also, so we'll ask them. And also, I'm taking this break so I can jump in because I want to change subjects a little bit here, because I want to talk chocolate. Because for those of you who don't know about Chris's series, our 2 twin sister sleuths, they have really, for probably my own personal life experience, the best job in the world. So Chris, could you talk a little bit about, what they do for their day jobs, and then talk a little bit about, and we talked about this the first time you were on, maybe a little bit more about what the whole chocolate thing is with this book, and about the tastings you have to go through and all these other things like that.
So when my agent read the first manuscript that I had sent in, she said, you need a stronger hook. And so the hook that I came up with was these poison themed chocolates that they sell in conjunction with the mystery store, right? Because it kind of ties together. And then when my editor read it, she said, "Oh, and of course we'll put some recipes at the back." And so I had to start making chocolate, something I had never done before.
Oh my gosh.
Not that it's a hardship to eat and taste and test chocolate for me. I keep it everywhere. It's there behind me. I mean, I love chocolate. And so I did have to do a fair bit of research. My husband's daughters, they make chocolates themselves and have for years. And so I interviewed one of his daughters, and she kind of went through the process. Plus I did a lot of Bernard Calipo videos that, taught me how to do it. And then I just literally dove in and created recipes and crossed my fingers and made them and hoped that they worked out. And they did, thankfully. So for this book, I decided I would go with one traditional molded chocolate and one easier recipe. So it's a truffle. And truffles are so simple. Literally anybody can do it. You don't need special equipment or know-how. You can just do that. And so anybody who just, wants to give that recipe a try, super easy. The molded chocolates are a little trickier, a little finickier. You do need to have, the molds and a few other things and stuff. So, but I mean, I'm not going to lie, it is a lot of fun when you get to kind of eat those chocolates at the end of the process, and you have to call it research, right? So, and when I'm writing, I am always keeping chocolate nearby. So that is, usually I try and limit myself. I haven't been doing very good with limits lately. And so I've been going through a fair bit of chocolate as I write each day. But yeah, I try to keep myself in the mood by having the chocolates nearby, and I burn the candles and whatever else it takes to kind of keep that atmosphere around me, so that, as I'm writing, I'm thinking, I'm feeling, I'm really just, able to get that right into the story, even right down to, smelling the chocolates. And
well, that sensory experience, I mean, it's so real, for obviously those of us and everybody in real life. And then that sounds so cool, such a brilliant move, really, that you immerse yourself in that as you're writing, which then, translates it to the page. I do have one question, and I apologize if this is going to create some controversy. Do you have a favorite chocolate?
I am definitely a lover of dark chocolate. So when I'm trying to be good and keep my chocolate intake, at, maybe 2 a day, I often will get the Lindt brand chocolate, the darkest, very bitter chocolate, because I genuinely like that really bitter, dark chocolate. So that is, for me, that's kind of my go-to. I do eat some other chocolates, I'm not going to lie. There are some caramel milk filled ones and some others, but my favorite is a good dark chocolate. So,
Sarah, do you have a favorite?
Oh man. I mean, I just had a bunch of the Dove dark chocolate. I can't remember what their special name for them is, but I love those little squares. But I'll eat anything, but probably not white chocolate. White chocolate's one that I'm is a bit too sweet for me. And we've got Mizan saying dark chocolate is one of her faves, 85%. For the cocoa in it. Chris, I can't imagine the panic attack that I would have had if somebody said, okay, well, we need recipes in the back of this book. So I give you so many props for learning a whole new craft to be able to share your story with everybody. And luckily you are, this evening, you're generously giving one of our viewers the chance to experience the fruits of your hard work with a special giveaway. So folks, our giveaway this evening for our US viewers is going to be a hardcover copy of A Christmas Candy Killing, which is Christina's first book. And if you happen to be joining us from Canada, and if you win the giveaway, Chris will send you either a ebook copy of A Christmas Candy Killing or A Nutcracker Nightmare. So we have a little bit of a difference based on where you have your roots today. And Chris, I didn't ask you this before the show, but what is a magic word that everyone can type into the chat so that they can enter into our giveaway this evening?
I did think about that because I knew that would be coming. Nutcracker, of course.
Love it.
Nutcracker. Okay. 1 or 2 words?
Nutcracker, 1 word.
Okay. Okay.
I was like, I hope it's 1 word because that's how I've spelled it my entire life.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And, hey, and speaking of the chocolate thing, I just want to say real quick, Mark, you and I are soulmates. Mark loves milk chocolate, especially caramel in his chocolate there. And Claudia says no dark chocolate for her. I got a sweet tooth. I love my milk chocolate. I love white chocolate. And I always kind of wonder if the fans of dark chocolate are also coffee drinkers, because I'm not a coffee drinker. And so sometimes I tend to associate dark chocolate, that dark bitter taste, with coffee. And that's just personally not my jam. But that's one of the great things about chocolate. There's so many kinds.
I think the reason why I love dark chocolate, or I like to eat dark chocolate the most, is because it's supposedly the healthiest for you. So I don't feel as bad like shoving my face full of it. But I do like coffee, and I love it when my coffee tastes like dark chocolate. Like that's like the ideal combination.
Yeah. And I don't drink coffee, but I drink a coffee flavored substitute, because I did drink coffee when I was probably, I guess, late teens. And I drank a lot of it. I mean, I really love the taste of coffee. I love the smell of coffee. I like to smell coffee beans. And so I do drink my substitute coffee, and I love how that pairs with dark chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe sometime we're going to have a chocolate and coffee episode, something like that.
We couldn't have it at late at night, because otherwise I would be up way too late.
Yeah. Chris, this has just been delightful. It's always a blast having you on. Is there one of the things that we haven't had a chance to talk to you about on your first visit is themes. And, your book, I mean, yes, they're holiday themed, but when you write your stories, is there a kind of a through line that you hope people take away in your books? In addition to, obviously, we want justice to prevail, the bad guy gets caught, all that kind of stuff, but anything in addition to that you hope people take away?
Yeah, I mean, they're cozy mysteries. So, I mean, and the thing that I really like about cozy mysteries is that the people in them are genuinely nice. You don't get a lot of really unlikable characters. And that to me is indicative of cozies, and the bad guy always gets it at the end. There's always a happy ending. And, in life, we don't always get that. The killer is not always found. And though, like if I had my way, the killer would be in real life as well. But honestly, yeah, it's just for me, the theme is always that, blood is thicker than water. Friends stay true to each other and loyal. And that is, I think that's kind of the theme. Even when, you might have a little bit of friction between whether it's friends or siblings, but in the end, the people always do, the niceness comes through. I have a love to hate her character in my books. And, I'm always thinking about, at some point, where does that arc go? Where do we start to have her, show some, redeeming qualities so that, we can, the niceness will win out in the end. So.
I feel like I know who you're talking about, and I am super excited because I'm like, oh, this I love those characters where you're like, we know that there's got to be something there, and we have to see where it goes. I love writing those characters, and I love experiencing and reading those characters. So I'm excited to know that that's on your purview.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, in book 2, I made that character who you and I know who we're talking about. I made her so that she likes Hannah. So even though she and Alex and she are just, oil and water, but she likes Hannah. And so, that's kind of that, kind of showing that, yes, she is, can also like people. She's just not strictly unlikable. So, and we'll see how I, change that over the rest of the books, maybe just a little warming up. So.
Well, that's real life. We all have those people that it's like, no matter what, I can't make this person happy, or they just grate on my nerves or whatever. You two are absolutely lovely. And, that's not a problem, for you two. And I do kind of want to shift gears again real quickly. For those of you who are fans of the cozy mystery genre, you may be aware, or you may not be aware, that the three of us were all represented by the same agent. Lovely, wonderful woman named Dawn Dowdle. Dawn recently passed away very suddenly, and it's been very heartbreaking. Dawn gave I think all three of us our starts. And we just kind of want to take a minute and kind of do a quick round table here, just kind of a little share a memory, a little vignette, or just something, in Dawn's memory. So, Sarah, how about you lead us off?
Sure. And I think to see where you and I are right now, JC, and to know that you're the reason that I found my way to Dawn, it's always like this, it's such a beautiful, like, full circle moment for me to see how connected we all are in this community, and how much, how one person can really affect us all. And so Dawn was the 73rd agent that I queried. I had been rejected after rejected, like, I was really down. And I had posted on Twitter, of all places, like, does anybody ever want to read a cozy mystery about a woman who uses social media to solve her crimes? And JC, you had messaged me and said, my agent is looking, and you should chat with her. And my first conversation with Dawn, she was like, she's like, I can't believe that people are telling you that this isn't relevant, because that's the feedback that I was getting. She's like, I love technology. I use it all the time. Everyone uses it all the time. Why isn't anyone she felt my frustrations for me. And every time that we got a critique from someone, that an editor responded with something, her responses just always made my day, because it was like, she would say, they don't know what they're talking about. It just she was somebody that was always in my corner. And I could probably say that the sun is orange, and sometimes it can be orange, I guess. The sun is green. And she'd be like, yes, Sarah, I support that. And I agree with you. And so it was just wonderful to have her in my corner, and to know that she was always rooting for me, and that she always had my back. And it's not to have that presence anymore feels extremely it's scary. And so I just miss having her guidance, and just having her to be there for me.
How about you, Chris?
Yeah, Dawn was my first agent. In fact, I did Pit Mad on Twitter, and that is how Dawn saw my tweet and liked it. And so I sent my query to her, and she offered me representation. And so, I've been very spoiled, because Dawn treated her authors very differently, from what I understand, than many agents. She, really treated us all like family. And so gave us, seriously, if you emailed her, you often had an answer almost immediately. Rarely did it go longer than an hour before getting an answer from her. And I mean, you could have as much or as little hand holding as you wanted. She was always happy to chat with you. I was lucky enough to have a Zoom with her a couple weeks before she passed. And we actually talked about, my, what was happening with book 3 and my other project that I've been working on. And so I was lucky to kind of have that kind of strategy session with her before her passing, because I feel like I'm, at least in the immediate future, I know what I'm doing and where I'm going. And so, eventually, yes, I will have to seek representation, but I know I've got a little bit of breathing room because of Dawn helping me, to make the decisions, to know where I'm going to be going for the next few months at least. So, she was, yeah. And I was lucky enough to meet her. Be forever grateful that I decided to go to Malice Domestic this year, 2023, because I got to meet her in person. So.
Yeah. Yeah, Dawn was a true champion of the new author, and she gave so many of us, our first break. And I signed originally with Dawn back in 2015 when I was writing romance. But my favorite story that I want to share is how she guided me into writing cozy mysteries. And it all goes back to back in the spring of 2017. Somebody on our author loop, Dawn maintained a wonderful Facebook author group and loop where we could kind of talk, where she updated folks and we could bat ideas back and forth, and it was wonderful. And somebody posted this picture, and it was just of this like small stream wandering, kind of meandering through, the middle of a field. And somebody just said, "Here's a little writer prompt for you." And that's kind of all it was. And I was just being kind of silly and said, "Oh, that looks like a, great spot for a murder mystery." I was writing romance. It was like easy for me to say, "Okay, here's something for y'all mystery authors." Because Dawn, the two groups that she predominantly represented were mystery authors and romance authors. So I just kind of shot off that comment just kind of as a what I thought was a good-hearted joke. And so Dawn shot right back. It's like, "Okay, well, why don't you write it?" And so it's like, oh, so having been called out, we actually had a really nice chat that she felt that, given how my romance books were, that it would be a real natural move for me to go from that to cozy mystery. And so I did. And since then, I've been fortunate enough to write a boatload of it, and I've had a great time. And that's all due to her. And that's one of the things about her. She was so great at giving us guidance in such a kind way. And
Agreed.
So, I'm just going to raise my glass of rye whiskey to her. It's the holiday season, that time when we hold our friends who are with us close and who we remember with great joy, our friends who are no longer with us. So, Dawn, thank you very much. Cheers.
Cheers. Salute. I think that guidance, I think that in fostering creativity and encouragement, because I think a lot of things in this business are discouraging. Like we get bad reviews, we get, rejections from agents, we get rejections from publishing houses, and to have that person that is always going to say yes. And, anytime that like you pitch an idea, it's like, yes, like take it and run with it. And having that, I think is just, it's a blessing. And we've got some folks chiming in on chat. Mark mentioning that he's known Dawn for years online. It was very shocking, and we're all we're still feeling it and going and just kind of doing what we can to stay positive and keep writing in her honor. So thank you everyone for letting us have that space, and being able to share those memories and her wonderful attributes with you all. As we, we kind of think about what we've lost, we can also think about all of the wonderful things that we have experienced this year as well. Especially this time of year, JC and I, we can look back on just this incredible show and this community that we've created through, and that you guys have become a part of and joining us here. And it really means a lot that we get to be bookish with you each week. And so we have much more bookish things happening this December, December starts tomorrow. I can't believe it. The end of the year. Oh, wow. We will have on the Bookish Hour, Linda Norlander is going to be joining us on December 14th at 8 p.m. On a Thursday. That'll be our final show before the holidays, but we do have a bunch of bookish moments. And if you head to our website, it's bookishtime.com. You can see who's coming up on our calendar. We've got Nan Reinhardt coming up on December 5th. Nan has been here quite a few times, and we love chatting with her. And I believe her new romance is Christmas themed. So yes. We're going to continue this wonderful bubbly holiday season that we've been able to have, especially with Chris, you kicking it off for us and just getting us into that really wonderful the spirit. So we thank you for being here.
Yeah, and speaking of which, Chris is like Santa Claus since she's given us this great gift. So I've got an idea. Hey, Chris, how about while Sarah does her little magic behind the wheel, reminder folks, if you want to be entered into the fabulous giveaway that we mentioned earlier, Chris, what's the magic word?
Nutcracker. And I also want to remind everyone, please get whoever the winner is, get your address in right away. I am heading to Great Falls tomorrow. So I'm crossing the border specifically to mail out all these giveaways. That's pretty cool. And if I can get that address to mail it out tomorrow, then you will get it before Christmas. So. Nice.
That's better than Amazon can promise, I bet you. So, Sarah, how about while you're doing your magic wheelie thing? I don't know. It's magic. It's the holidays. Chris, tell us what you're up to. Where can people find you online? Are you doing any book signings, or what's going on there?
You can always find me online. Instagram is my happy place. Christina Romeril Writer. I am also at Christina Romeril Writer on Facebook. I am on Twitter, though not as much, at Romeril Chris. And of course, I also have a website, ChristinaRomeril.com. You can find me and message me through all those places. I always like to remind, if you are doing a book club, or if you request the book, either of my books from a library, message me. I will send out some bookmarks and signed nameplate or the book plates if those are requested. So please feel free to do that. Next week, I will be on Cozy's Conversations and More on Facebook doing a live. So next week on Tuesday.
Well, cool.
I just discovered that group and it's awesome.
Yes.
I recently joined. I was like, wow, this is a great group. There's so many great groups out there. And it's when you find one that's like, oh, wow, like this is exciting to find more people that love to immerse themselves in cozies.
So for our viewers, what's the name of that again? That group?
It's
Cozy's Conversations and More.
Okay.
So, and you do have to join. So you need to answer a couple of questions. And so, if you want to be part of the Facebook Live that I'm doing on Tuesday, make sure you join in advance so that you can be a part of that.
Okay, cool. All right, Sarah.
Our winner for this evening is, drumroll please, everybody, Claudia Carpenter. Congratulations,
Woo! Right,
Claudia. Thank you for everybody who entered. Wonderful. And Claudia, if you can just message us at giveaways@thebookishhour.com, although I believe we probably have your address on file, but if you could bump it to the top of my inbox, that would be very much appreciated. So folks, again, thank you very much for being here. Real quickly, we got to do a speed round for what are we reading, what are we watching, consuming, being entertained by. JC, what's keeping you busy?
Just finished watching Magpie Murders on PBS. It was so much fun. If you get a chance, if you haven't seen it yet, it's totally worth it. So I'm actually down here in New Orleans on vacation, and I picked up at a local bookstore a Lillian Jackson Braun, The Cat Who Talked Turkey, which is perfect for the week after Thanksgiving here in the States. So that's what I'm reading. Chris, how about you?
I am currently reading Leslie Budowitz's As the Christmas Cookie Crumbles and enjoying that because it is set in Jewel Bay, Montana, which is the fictionalized Big Fork, Montana, which is very close to my fictional village of Harriston. And so I'm reading that. And of course, you know that I am watching a ton of Hallmark Christmas movies right now.
Yes.
I'm going to get started on mine.
How about you, Sarah?
I am just picking up Death at a Scottish Wedding by Lucy Connolly. It's an advanced copy of it that I am doing a review for Kings River Life magazine in January. So I'm super excited to dive in and see what mystery the festivities bring. As for watching, I just started the new Netflix docuseries Life on Our Planet. For folks who remember when I went through my prehistoric planet phase, it feels like it's an echo of that. This one's narrated by Morgan Freeman. So I feel like there's a little competition between him and David Attenborough right now with Netflix versus Apple. But so far, it was the first episode was really enjoyable. And I'm looking forward to watching the second one this evening. So
nice.
Perfect.
Nice.
So we've got some recommendations for folks to take on the road as everybody begins their holiday travels. Again, Christina, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your time with us this evening. Congratulations on another release, and it's always wonderful to chat with you and talk all things Christmas and chocolates.
Thank you so much, both of you, for having me. This is such a favorite place of mine to hang out with you guys. It's always a blast. Thank you.
We love to hear it, and we love to have you. And we can't wait to talk about book 3 when the time comes.
Yes. Yeah.
And folks, again, thank you so much for those that joined our live show. We really appreciate you being here. But until next time, stay bookish, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thanks.